Blake Lively is slamming The Hollywood Reporter's recent magazine cover. The cover features the actress launching a slingshot at Justin Baldoni amid their ongoing legal battle.
What if everything you thought you knew about one of Hollywood's most adored actresses was a lie? The smiles, the press-friendly image, the perfect marriage. It was all part of a carefully curated illusion. But illusions don't last forever. And now, the truth is clawing its way to the surface. A behind-the-scenes feud has exploded into a public firestorm. It started with whispers, then came the lawsuit. Now, lawyers are walking out, damning evidence is being leaked, and some of Hollywood's most powerful insiders are quietly distancing themselves from a woman they once praised. At the center of it all is Blake Lively, a star once seen as untouchable, now caught in a scandal that's growing darker by the day.
Yeah, and also, like, this is the most, like, divisive thing we've seen in a long time. You're either Team Justin or your Team Blake. It's like the new, like, Team Jacob, Team Edward.
This isn't just a legal battle. It's a battle for control, image, and truth. And the deeper you look, the uglier it gets. So what really happened behind the scenes? Why is Blake's carefully guarded persona falling apart? And what secrets have been hidden for far too long? Because this might not just ruin her reputation, it might expose the Hollywood game she played all too well. But the moment everything started to fall apart, it wasn't on a red carpet or in a viral clip. It was when Blake Lively made one bold move she thought she could control. She filed a lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, and that single act opened the floodgates to a scandal no one saw coming. Blake Lively has always played the part perfectly, America's effortless golden girl. But when she filed a lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, the carefully controlled image began to slip. The headlines came fast, framing her as a woman standing her ground. At first glance, it looked like a simple case of creative conflict, but behind the scenes, it was anything but simple.
I am so oddly invested in this case. I follow so many TikTokers who have gone through 800 pages of case files, and listen, I'm not shocked by this latest conspiracy because she said herself her husband is all over this film.
The lawsuit accused Baldoni of undermining her creative input on It Ends With Us. Blake positioned herself as the silenced visionary, fighting to reclaim control over a project she deeply believed in. Major outlets picked up her side immediately. The media cast Justin as the problem, an overbearing director allegedly shutting her out. Blake's voice rang loud, and for a moment it seemed like the industry was listening. But then the silence broke, and Justin hit back. His team didn't just deny the allegations, they dismantled them, piece by piece, with actual receipts. Raw text messages, full-length emails, video clips from set, evidence that told a very different story. One where Blake wasn't shut out, she was allegedly the one doing the shutting down. The person claiming to be sidelined was, in fact, running the show.
In Blake's first amended complaint, Blake changed what she alleges about what happened while filming the slow dance scene, now that the footage has been released for everyone to see.
And that's when things took a turn no one expected. Her own lawyer, one of the most respected names in entertainment law, suddenly backed out of the case. No interview, no public defense, just gone. And that silence hit louder than anything either side had said. Because in Hollywood, lawyers don't abandon solid cases. They don't walk away unless something on the inside is seriously wrong. From that moment on, it was clear this wasn't going to be a routine legal spat. It was going to be a public unraveling. But what happened next? That raised even more questions about Blake's story and who she really is when the cameras aren't rolling. If there's one thing that speaks louder than any press release, it's when your own lawyer walks away, and fast. That's exactly what happened to Blake Lively. The moment Justin Baldoni's team revealed they had hard evidence ready to drop, Blake's high-profile attorney Meryl Konigsberg backed out of the case. No explanation, no fight, just silence and a sudden disappearance.
For those who are not in the Hollywood world, what is wrong with her taking over the film?
I've never seen it before in my 30-plus year career in Hollywood.
And in the legal world, that silence is deafening. Konigsberg wasn't some inexperienced name. She's been around Hollywood's legal trenches long enough to know what a winnable case looks like. But sources say she saw what Justin's team had prepared, and suddenly, it was game over. The evidence wasn't just damaging, it was devastating. And when you're being asked to defend a version of events that doesn't match the receipts, most professionals won't stick around to go down with the ship. But it wasn't just about what Blake had left out. It was also about how she treated the people meant to protect her. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Blake allegedly disrespected her legal team, criticized their strategy, even refused to pay invoices on time. There were reports that she second-guessed Koenigsberg constantly, undermining her while expecting a full-blown courtroom defense. And that kind of behavior, it doesn't just damage a case, it isolates you from the very people standing between you and total collapse.
This looks good for Baldoni, right? He's like, we want to make it all public. And sometimes lawyers can do this knowing that they can't actually do what they say they're going to do.
The exit of her lawyer wasn't framed in a press release, but it didn't need to be. It sent one message loud and clear. Blake wasn't telling the full truth, and her legal team wanted no part of what was coming next. And what came next wasn't just legal fallout, it was personal. Because once the cracks started forming, people began to look beyond the lawsuit, and what they uncovered about Blake's past behavior made the story even messier. The lawsuit was shocking, but what came next was worse. As the case started falling apart, the internet did what it does best. It started digging, and what people found peeled back the layers of Blake Lively's polished persona to reveal something completely different, something a lot less charming. Clips from old interviews started resurfacing, not one or two, but dozens, each one painting a picture of someone who wasn't just snarky or misunderstood, but cold, calculated, and condescending. The kind of behavior that didn't feel like one bad moment, but a pattern she'd gotten away with for years. There was the red carpet moment where she awkwardly dismissed a female reporter's question with a smug joke about lady lumps, or the time she rolled her eyes when asked about fans connecting with her character's trauma.
The agency group PR LLC and Jennifer Abel, collectively the Wayfarer parties, we write to advise the court of an issue that the Wayfarer parties wish to address at the upcoming conference on Monday, February 3rd, 2025.
She laughed it off, suggesting anyone who approached her with their real-life pain should just share their location so she could... what? Comfort them? Track them? Even her co-stars seemed uncomfortable in the moment. Their body language said everything Blake didn't. And then there's the Gossip Girl era, a time fans romanticized, but cast insiders remembered very differently. Blake and Leighton Meester played best friends on screen, but off camera. It was a Cold War. Reports surfaced that Blake repeatedly mocked Leighton's background, even making tasteless jokes about her being born in prison, a deeply personal topic Leighton had been brave enough to share publicly. Some called it dark humor, others called it bullying, but whatever you call it, it didn't stop there. Blake allegedly treated the entire set like it was her personal kingdom. Crew members spoke of power struggles. Co-stars were pressured to side with her during disagreements. It was less of a team and more of a hierarchy, with Blake at the top. And it didn't end with Gossip Girl. On the set of It Ends With Us, similar behavior allegedly resurfaced. According to multiple reports, Blake didn't just act in the film, she tried to control it, rewriting scenes, overriding the director, making cast members feel like they had to pick sides between her and Justin.
He told us that Justin Baldoni claims she tried to take over his movie because she has a history of saying, okay, I'll be the star, but what I secretly want to do is direct it and edit it and produce it.
It wasn't collaboration, it was control. When people started connecting the dots, a pattern became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a one-time fallout. It was a career full of burned bridges, bruised egos, and carefully cleaned up PR damage. At first, her team tried to spin it. They blamed it on her quirky sense of humor. They said she was shy, misunderstood, or just playing a role. But eventually, even those excuses wore thin. Because the truth, Blake Lively wasn't misunderstood. She just wasn't very nice. And the internet never forgets. But as the backlash started to build, Blake's next move would raise even more eyebrows. Because her influence didn't stop at lawyers or co-stars. It allegedly reached all the way into the media itself. Just when people thought the situation couldn't get any more calculated, something happened that made everyone stop and look twice. The media started speaking before the courts even could, and not just any media outlet. The New York Times, literally hours after Blake filed her lawsuit, a polished, in-depth article was published. Not a short news piece, a full editorial breakdown packed with detail, insider commentary, and bold conclusions that echoed Blake's side of the story almost word for word. The timing was so precise, it didn't feel like reporting. It felt like a script that had already been written.
Dear Judge Lyman, as counsel for Wayfarer Studios LLC, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, Steve Sarowitz, It Ends With Us Movie LLC, Melissa Nathan.
People started asking, how did they gather, verify, write, edit, and publish all of that in under 24 hours? The answer most people landed on, they didn't. The article was likely drafted before the lawsuit ever went public, fed piece by piece behind the scenes. And who would have had access to those details in advance? The same person filing the lawsuit, Justin Baldoni, didn't just notice the timing, he called it out in court. In a new $400 million lawsuit, he named Blake, the New York Times, and yes, even Ryan Reynolds as part of what he described as an orchestrated smear campaign. He claimed this wasn't journalism, this was manipulation, and it wasn't just damaging, it was career-threatening, and he had a point. The article didn't read like neutral reporting, it read like a takedown. By the time most people even heard about the lawsuit, the narrative had already been set. Blake was the victim, Justin was the problem, and any defense he gave after that looked like damage control. To make matters worse, the New York Times allegedly didn't even give Justin or his team the chance to comment before the article dropped. No calls, no questions, no statement request. They just published and moved on.
He and 9 other plaintiffs, including his publicists, have brought a $250 million lawsuit against the New York Times, essentially alleging them of libel and false light invasion of privacy.
Like they were in on something the rest of the world hadn't caught up to yet. Critics slammed the piece for its bias, legal experts questioned its ethics, but for Blake, it seemed like a power move. She wasn't just playing the courtroom, she was playing public opinion, and for a minute it looked like she was winning, but she underestimated the fallout, because once the article came under fire, the focus shifted. No one was asking what Justin had done anymore. They were asking what Blake had orchestrated, and suddenly her media chessboard started working against her. But the biggest red flag wasn't what the media said, it was what Blake didn't want people to see in the first place. For someone supposedly fighting for truth, Blake Lively's evidence told a strangely incomplete story. At first glance, her lawsuit looked packed with screenshots, messages, and HR complaints. But when people started reading closely, one thing stood out. Key details were missing, and not by accident. Entire sections of her proof were redacted, names blurred, dates blacked out, timestamps cropped out of screenshots. In some cases, messages were cut mid-conversation, with only Blake's version left visible. It wasn't just selective, it felt curated, controlled, like a story being told in pieces, carefully arranged to paint her as the victim and erase anything that didn't support that role. Legal experts took notice, so did fans, and so did Justin's team, who responded with everything Blake had left out. They dropped full-length screenshots, complete with timestamps.
Well, look, again, it's a work in progress. If I had figured it out, the world would look different.
Behind the scenes videos, full message threads that showed context Blake's version conveniently left behind. Some of the very complaints she used as evidence turned out to have come after her own emails triggered internal conflict, details that were completely missing from her side of the story. And then came the question no one could ignore: why hide so much if you're telling the truth? Even more suspicious was the timing of those documents. HR complaints were dated vaguely or redacted altogether. Some lacked signatures, others didn't even name the alleged complainants. It was starting to look less like a lawsuit and more like a PR stunt disguised as legal action. That's when people really started to turn. Viewers who had initially backed Blake began asking, if the facts are this shaky, what else has she been hiding? And why go through so much effort to keep the full story from surfacing? But Blake's camp stayed quiet. No explanations, no corrections, just silence, and a noticeable shift in public tone. And as her side scrambled to recover, Justin's team claimed Blake was suddenly trying to change course, behind closed doors. As the cracks in Blake's case deepened and the public turned skeptical, something unexpected happened behind the scenes. Her team allegedly reached out to Justin's, quietly floating the idea of a settlement. No public statement, no media spin, just a private attempt to make it all go away. According to sources close to the case, Blake's side was eager to avoid a full-blown trial after all the backlash, the damaged credibility, and a lawyer who had already walked away.
This text from Blake Lively is insane. If you knew me in person longer, you'd have a sense of how flirty and yummy the ball busting would play.
A courtroom showdown was the last thing she needed. A quiet agreement sealed behind closed doors would be the cleanest escape. No cameras, no transcripts, no more damning evidence leaking out. But Justin wasn't having it. His legal team, led by Brian Friedman, shut the door on the idea immediately. Settlement wasn't just off the table. It was never on it. For Justin, this wasn't about money. This was about clearing his name. The accusations had already cost him millions, tanked industry relationships, and dragged his family into a media circus. A quick payout wouldn't fix that. In a recent interview, Friedman made it clear this wasn't just another celebrity feud. He described the emotional and psychological toll the allegations had taken on Justin, his wife, and their children. He even questioned what amount of money could possibly undo that kind of damage. His stance was firm. This case needed to be decided in court, not swept under a rug. Blake's team, meanwhile, reportedly panicked. What started as a bold attack had become a slow-motion collapse, and with Justin refusing to play by the usual Hollywood rules, her options were running out fast, and just when it seemed like things couldn't spiral further, another name stepped forward to quietly back away from the storm. When things started getting messy, Ryan Reynolds did what most Hollywood veterans would do. He tried to disappear from the narrative. He filed a motion to be removed from the lawsuit altogether, insisting he had no real connection to the case. But that move raised more eyebrows than it closed, because according to Justin Baldoni's team, Ryan wasn't just a passive bystander. He was deeply involved. In newly released statements, Justin's lawyer Brian Friedman didn't hold back. He accused Ryan of using his enormous industry influence to quietly sabotage Justin's career.
Well, Baldoni looks like what's the word? He's got like a. You remember going to school with that kid that always raised his hand real quick in school?
The allegations claimed Ryan pressured agencies behind the scenes, influenced executives, and helped push the smear campaign into motion. And then, when the heat got too high, he tried to walk away like none of it was his doing. Friedman slammed Ryan's motion as arrogant, calling it a clear attempt to run from the consequences. He claimed Ryan had left fingerprints all over the situation, from pulling strings in Hollywood to manipulating press narratives, and he wasn't letting him off the hook so easily. The timing of Ryan's withdrawal attempt didn't help his case either. Just as Blake's claims were unraveling, and just as the media was being called out for bias, Ryan's legal team quietly filed to exit. It didn't look innocent, it looked calculated. And for someone who had always maintained a clean, lovable image in the public eye, it was a rare glimpse behind the curtain. A glimpse that suggested Ryan might not just be Blake's supportive husband, he might have been a key player in a strategy to destroy someone's career. The public started asking the hard questions. Was this just damage control? Or had Ryan been helping steer the ship all along? And now that it was sinking, was he jumping before it dragged him down too? Either way, it didn't work. The motion was challenged. Friedman made it clear Ryan would not be allowed to walk away untouched. Not this time. And as Blake's legal team struggled to stay afloat and her husband faced serious allegations of manipulation, the final curtain was drawing closer. The image Blake had spent years perfecting was crumbling, and there was still one final blow left to come. By now, the Blake Lively that audiences thought they knew, the graceful, untouchable star with the golden reputation, barely resembled the one unraveling in real time. The lawsuit had backfired. Her lawyer had vanished. The evidence didn't match her story, and her inner circle was quietly trying to distance themselves from the wreckage. But through it all, Blake stayed silent. No interviews, no social media statements, no attempts to clarify or walk anything back.
And suddenly there were these headlines, and people were just very upset with Blake Lively and started stringing together her pattern, okay? So her reputation, you could say, last year completely tanked.
And that silence said more than any press release ever could. The internet filled the gaps. Every old interview clip that showed her being snarky or dismissive, every resurfaced report of feuds with co-stars, every whispered story from a set she'd once controlled, now carried new weight. What once felt like isolated incidents started to look like a pattern, and for many, the illusion was gone. Her team, once quick to smooth over controversy, went quiet too. There was no PR cleanup, no controlled narrative. It was as if the damage was too big to fix, and they knew it. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni refused to back down. His lawsuit didn't just seek justice, it was reshaping the entire story. He wasn't asking for pity, he was demanding accountability, not just from Blake, but from the media machine and the industry insiders who, according to him, tried to destroy him behind closed doors. And now, with the trial looming and public opinion shifting fast, Blake faces more than just legal consequences. She's staring down a total collapse of the brand she spent years building, because once the cracks start to show, people stop seeing what you've tried to project and start seeing what you've tried to hide. The woman who once controlled every part of her image is now at the mercy of headlines she can't spin, court documents she can't redact, and a public that's no longer buying the narrative. What happens next? That's still unclear. Maybe a new lawyer steps in. Maybe a desperate settlement gets worked out behind closed doors. Or maybe this really is the end of the Blake Lively story as we knew it. Because in Hollywood, you can play the part for a while, but eventually the truth writes its own script. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a reveal, a slow, unraveling spotlight on how carefully crafted public images can fall apart when receipts start speaking louder than reputation. And in Blake Lively's case, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. She may have stepped into this fight thinking she had the upper hand, a supportive husband, a media machine, a flawless image, but in trying to control the story, she might have exposed a truth she never meant for the world to see. So the real question now isn't whether she'll win the lawsuit, it's whether she'll ever recover from the damage it's already done. Will Hollywood forgive her? Will fans forget? Or is this the moment her carefully curated empire starts to collapse for good? Either way, one thing's for sure, this story is far from over.